Call whoever you want." He laughed in front of everyone. His voice was loud, confident, cruel, until the call connected, until the color drained. From his face, until he realized who was listening on the other end, "Call whoever you want." The words cracked. Across the quiet airport terminal, like a slap, people froze mid-step. A coffee cup trembled in someone's hand. A child stopped asking questions. Marcus Dane leaned back against the polished counter, a slow grin spreading across his face. He wore a sharp suit, gold watch flashing under the bright lights. He believed in power, in control, in being the loudest. Voice in the room. Across from him stood a man who looked like he did not belong in the noise of the modern world. Elias Turner was tall, but slightly stooped, as if carrying weight no one else could see. His jacket was old, but clean. On his chest, pinned with quiet care, was a small row of faded medals. His hands were steady, though the veins rose like worn roads beneath his skin. A thin scar traced his jaw. His eyes were calm, too calm. Security had stopped Elias at the gate. His ID was old. The system flagged it. Marcus, who happened to be flying first class and had influence in the airport board, had stepped in when he heard the delay was affecting departures. "Rules are rules," Marcus had said. And now here they were. Elias did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He only asked to make one phone call. Marcus laughed, the kind of laugh meant to shrink a man. "Call whoever you want," he said. "Let's see who picks up for you." The room felt heavy. What no one there knew was that Elias Turner had once carried more than medals 20-8 years earlier. Elias had walked through desert heat so thick it pressed against the lungs like a wall. Sand had clung to his boots. Its smoke had burned his throat. The smell of metal and fire had filled his nose for weeks. He had been young then, broad shoulders, steady aim, eyes sharp with purpose. He had led a small unit through a night that turned the sky red. He remembered the weight of a wounded soldier in his arms, the warmth of blood soaking through his uniform, the sound of distant cries swallowed by wind. He remembered whispering to a terrified 19-year-old, "Stay with me, you are not alone." Elias had lost friends whose laughter still echoed in his dreams. He had written letters to mothers with shaking hands. He had stood at quiet ceremonies where folded flags were handed over with silent nods. He came home with scars that doctors could see, and others they could not. For years after, loud noises made his heart race. Crowded rooms made him scan exits, but he never complained. He never demanded service, he believed. It was not about being seen. It was about standing firm when others could not. Back in the airport, Marcus saw none of that. He saw an old man delaying his flight. He saw an inconvenience, public silence wrapped. Around the scene, people watched, but said nothing. A young woman with headphones looked down. A father shifted his weight but stayed quiet. A staff member glanced at the medals on Ilias's chest, then quickly looked away. Authority stood on one side of the counter. Dignity stood on the other. Elias pulled a small phone from his pocket. It was not new. The screen was scratched. Fingers hovered for a moment before dialing. Marcus crossed his arms. "You really think someone important is going to fix this for you?" he said, his voice dripping with disbelief. Elias did not answer. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then someone picked up. Elias did not change his tone. He spoke softly. He gave his name, his location. He did not complain. He did not accuse. Simply said there seemed to be confusion about his clearance. Marcus leaned closer, smirking. "Tell them Marcus Dane is here," he said. "That should speed things up." Elias lifted his eyes. Now, there was something in them now. Not anger. Not fear. Memory. He handed the phone across the counter. Marcus raised a brow. "You want me to talk?" Elias nodded once. The smirk stayed on Marcus's face as he pressed the phone to his ear. "Yes, this is Marcus Dane," he began. "I am on the airport advisory board," and his voice stopped. The grin faded. His posture changed. The color in his face drained slowly, like ink washed from paper. Around him, the air shifted. On the other end of the line was not a clerk. Not a low-level manager, it was a name Marcus knew well. General Raymond Cole. A man whose reputation carried weight in every federal building in the state. A man who rarely raised his voice because he never needed to. General Cole's tone was calm, measured. The kind of calm that comes from decades of command. Marcus swallowed. "Yes, sir," he said, suddenly smaller. He listened, nodded, his shoulders stiffened. The general did not shout. He did not threaten. He only spoke of records, of commendations, of missions that were never public, of lives saved under fire. He spoke of Sergeant First Class Elias Turner, as if speaking of family, and then he said something that made Marcus grip the counter. "If Mr. Turner is being delayed, I will personally ensure the delay is corrected immediately." Marcus handed the phone back with unsteady fingers. Elias listened for a few seconds, thanked the general quietly, and ended the call. Silence filled the terminal again. But it was different now. Marcus cleared his throat. "There seems to have been a mistake," he said. His voice had lost its edge. Security officers straightened. One of them looked at Elias's medals again, this time with recognition. The system updated within minutes. Clearance confirmed. Its access granted. But something else changed too. Whispers spread through the waiting passengers. "That's him? Someone?" murmured. "I read about that unit years ago," another said softly. Elias did not react. He adjusted his jacket and picked up his worn duffel bag. Marcus stepped back. "I wasn't aware of your background," he began. Elias looked at him for a long moment. He could have spoken about sacrifice, about nights without sleep, about friends who never came home. Instead, said only one line. "Respect does not need volume." The words hung in the air like a truth no one could argue with. Marcus lowered his gaze in that moment. Hours shifted. Without a single raised voice, but the story did not end there. As Elias moved toward the gate, a young airport employee approached him. Her eyes were bright with emotion. "My grandfather served," she said softly. "Thank you," Elias nodded. His expression gentle. A father who had stayed silent earlier removed his cap as Elias passed. A small boy, noticing his father's gesture, did the same. One by one, people stood. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. In respect, Marcus watched it happen. Watched the room honor a man he had mocked. Minutes before, he felt the weight of his own laughter pressing against his chest. Elias paused before boarding. He turned slightly, looking over the crowd. He did not smile wide. He did not wave. But his eyes softened. "Honor is not about being known," he said calmly. "It is about standing when others fall." Those words would echo long after the flight departed, as the plane lifted into the sky. Sunlight streamed through the terminal windows. It touched the polished floors. It reflected off glass. It warmed the metals on Elias's chest. Marcus remained behind. For the first time in years, he felt small in a way money could not fix. He understood something then. True strength does not shout. It does not demand attention. It stands steady and lets truth speak for itself. Days later, a quiet letter arrived at Elias's modest home. It was from the airport board. A formal apology, an invitation to speak at a Veterans Appreciation event. He read it at his kitchen table, where morning light filtered through simple curtains. The house smelled faintly of coffee and old wood. On the wall hung framed photos of young men in uniform. Frozen in time, he traced one frame gently. He did not need applause, but he accepted the invitation, because sometimes silence teaches louder than anger ever could. At the event weeks later, Marcus attended to. Not in the front row, not in a place of control, just among the crowd. When Elias stepped onto the stage, he did not speak of conflict. He did not speak of pain. He spoke of unity, of carrying each other when the road is hard, of remembering that the person standing quietly next to you may have fought battles you will never see. The audience rose to their feet. Marcus stood as well, not because others did, but because he finally understood, call whoever you want. Those words had once been spoken with pride. Now, they echoed as a reminder. Never measure a person by how loudly they speak. Measure them by how steady they stand. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one who holds the strongest line. If this story moved you, share where you are watching from. Share a word of respect for those who serve quietly around you. Subscribe for more stories that honor silent strength, unseen sacrifice, and the power of dignity that never needs to shout.